These are not the family's words. These are not the lawyer's words. A federal judge has said that it is reasonable to consider, it is reasonable to say that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia employed its agents to assist the hijackers. Let that sit in again because it bears repeating. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia employed its agents to assist the hijackers. And we have American lobbyists and we have American lawyers defending them. We have live golfers taking money hands over fists, and yet these families mourn. This isn't just once a day or a time a year. This is every day we wage this fight. And we're looking for a leader, and we're looking for someone with the courage to stand up for these families. Put America first, not Saudi Arabia. Have the courage to do what's right. My dad did. Terry's husband did. The FDNY did. The NYPD did. Thousands of us did. If our government had just even an iota of the courage that our family members had, this would have been over 20 years ago. So we need to call attention to this. We need to push back and fight as hard as we can. We're not going anywhere. We're never going to give up until we have truth, justice, and accountability. I'll turn it over to Terry.
Did you want to talk about the support network at all?
Just wanted to mention, explain a little bit about the evidence that we have. So what the federal judge has said and what he's ruled on is he's ruling on the indefensible facts, the irrefutable facts. And he took the careful time to write a 45-page decision. It took him 13 months, but he made a decision based on what is known to be 100% true. He did not make a decision on emotion, on supposition. He made a decision on what can be known or what is known as facts. And the fact is that there were at least 13 Saudi government officials connected to the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. They were working and operating in and out of the Saudi consulates and the Saudi embassies. They were funneling support from the Ministry of Islamic Affairs in Washington, D.C., to their embassies in San Diego, to the hijackers' handlers, right down to the hijackers themselves. And what we now know is that more than 2 years before the hijackers arrived, the Saudi government sent an advanced team. Sudan and Sudairi are the names of two individuals who many believe are Saudi intelligence agents. We can't prove that, but we do know that Omar al-Bayoumi was, as according to the FBI, a paid co-optee of Saudi intelligence. So what we now know and what we know to be fact is that the Saudi government sent this advanced team, Sudan and Sudairi. They landed here in the United States. They were welcomed into the King Fahd Mosque in Southern California, and then they made a trek across this country. And we were able to document each step, where they stayed, who they stayed with. And miraculously, when the hijackers landed here, they took the same exact steps. They stopped at the same hotels, they stopped at the same houses. So we now know that Sudan and Sudairi, who were told by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to come here, we know they were plotting the course. If anybody knows anything about Al-Qaeda, they'll tell you Al-Qaeda are meticulous planners. There is no way Al-Qaeda would have sent 19 thugs here with no knowledge of English, no money, no idea how to fly a plane, no experience of Western culture, and let them fend for themselves and pull off the most consequential and devastating attack in this country's history. It simply wasn't possible. They had to have had help. They had to have a support network, and that support network, we now know, a judge now knows, came in the form of the Saudi government. There's another gentleman, Omar al-Bayoumi. This is the man who our own FBI says was working for Saudi intelligence. In the days after the attacks, the FBI asked Scotland Yard, the MPS police, to raid his apartment. What they found is incredible. Horrific, actually. They found that Omar al-Bayoumi had a notebook. And in that notebook, he had the handwritten Al-Qaeda code names for the hijackers. They're called kunyas. Nobody knows what your kunya is unless you know them personally. So it shows that Bayoumi had foreknowledge that these Al-Qaeda hijackers, that these terrorists, he knew them by their code name, written in a book. He had a sketch of an airplane, and next to that sketch was an algorithm. The FBI says that algorithm is a rudimentary way of how to fly a plane onto a target into the horizon. So we had foreknowledge of the modus of the attack. Again, I want to remind you, this is a Saudi government intelligence agent. He demonstrates foreknowledge of the mode of the attack by having an airplane with an algorithm. He demonstrates that he knows that the people that he's helping in Southern California are Al-Qaeda terrorists intent on doing harm because he has their combative Al-Qaeda kunya. He has their name, their code name. And the third thing, the most egregious, is he has a video targeting the United States Capitol. So he knows the mode of the attack with the plane, he knows who's going to do the attack with knowing the Al-Qaeda hijackers' code names, and he knows where that attack is supposed to happen because he's casing the United States Capitol and talking about the structural support networks, the ingresses and the egresses, and he's referring to the plan. All this, the judge has said, it's too much, it's a bridge too far. But this is what we've all known for 20 years. And it's time for America to learn what we've been fighting. And we're asking, we're pleading for the American media, for President Trump, for everybody to join in unity. This is the most bipartisan thing that we can do as a country. This is the best thing that we can do for the memories of our loved ones, is let's stand up for what's right and just, and let's have truth, accountability, and closure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brett. I'm Terry Strada, and I am the National Chair for 9/11 Families United. And in my role, I work with the families as a liaison between us, Congress, the media, and so on. Thank you for being here, and I might be a little repetitive. That's the disadvantage of going second, but I also might have some things Brett didn't say. No matter what challenges we have faced over the last 2 decades, when on September 11th, 2001, all of our lives were forever changed by the largest terrorist attack the world has ever witnessed, hope has been our guiding light. Hope refers to a feeling of anticipation and desire for a positive future outcome. It gets you through the difficult times, and it is needed for productive change. For 2 decades, I have had hope while proudly advocating for Saudi accountability. Today, through everyone's perseverance and hard work, our hope for truth, accountability, and justice has finally achieved success. After years of very hard work to convince the court that we deserve to have our claims against Saudi Arabia heard in court, a federal judge spent a full year to look at all the evidence, and that judge rejected 24 years of Saudi Arabia's denying and lying, and ruled there is credible evidence the government of Saudi Arabia played a witting role in helping the 9/11 hijackers with their terrorist activity, and that the kingdom offered no credible evidence to counter the evidence produced by the plaintiff's legal team. 24 years earlier, the hope and fight for justice is finally here. The judge ruled we will have our day in court, and this case will go to trial. Everything Brett just laid out has taken years to bring about. To go from what we knew about the support network over a decade ago from former Senator Bob Graham, who tirelessly advocated for the truth about its purpose, the support network, to what the federal court has now found to be factual based on the evidence considered. It is important to note, after 24 years of listening to the kingdom misconstrue a single passage from the 9/11 Commission report to suggest wrongly that the Commission exonerated Saudi Arabia, we can now say unequivocally it did not exonerate the kingdom. Saudi Arabia's false narrative about its so-called exoneration was allowed to persist for almost a quarter century, in very large part because the FBI, from the very start and in the many years that have followed, has allowed it to persist by hiding evidence that would have incriminated Saudi Arabia and its agents. Immediately after the attacks, the FBI had incriminating evidence, as Brett was saying, in its possession for use in interrogating a Saudi agent, Omar al-Bayoumi, that they had in custody, who was, even then, known to be at the core of the attack plan, but prevented its use during the interrogation and encouraged the release of the Saudi agent. Based on the information uncovered in the civil litigation against Saudi Arabia, mostly produced by UK authorities, and from the information disclosed in the Sunday Times article out in London, or from London, published just this past weekend, we now know in the days after the attacks, US authorities requested that the UK authorities raid Bayoumy's home in the UK, seize that evidence, and detain Bayoumi. After his home was raided, the evidence was seized, bagged, and given to US authorities, who were supposed to have then assessed the evidence for use in their UK's authorities' interrogation of Bayoumi. Only that never happened. And based on the information uncovered in the Sunday Times, we now know that the FBI began its interference with the 9/11 investigation within weeks of the brutal attack on the United States. Because according to the UK police authority sources quoted in the Sunday Times, the FBI never shared the information with the officers who were interrogating Bayoumi, who was held in custody for a week. Likewise, in the events months and years after the attacks, the FBI did not make any of the evidence it had public. It did not assess it or use it to investigate the links between Saudi agents and the attacks. It never shared the evidence with the FBI San Diego field office in charge of investigating the time that Bayoumi and two of the hijackers spent in San Diego. It never shared it with those working with the FBI's Operation Encore, the very group within the FBI looking at the Saudi connections to the 9/11 attacks. It never shared the evidence with the Congressional Joint Inquiry into intelligence activities before and after the attacks. It never shared it in its entirety with the 9/11 Commission. Then, and in the decades that followed, the FBI continued to prevent disclosure of the most incriminating evidence against Saudi Arabia. It also never, wow, there were so many nevers, it never gave all of the incriminating evidence in response to a 2018 subpoena served on them for the civil suit against Saudi Arabia, or in response to President Biden's executive order 14040 mandating a declassification review of all 9/11 investigative documents. Instead, the FBI continued to hide the evidence and dismissed what pointed directly at Saudi Arabia. That conduct allowed the lies to persist and prevented analysis of the evidence that would have unmasked the lies. For 24 years, past FBIs under 4 administrations have purposefully withheld evidence and lied to all of us. Imagine what the public reaction would have been back in 2001, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and if they had had this information. You know, what would the outrage be? What would the accountability have been screaming? It all would have been screaming to hold Saudi Arabia accountable. It would have dominated the news and political discourse. It should not be any different just because the FBI swept it all under the rug for 24 years. Just this Monday, prompted by the Sunday Times article, Great Britain authorities, they found the FBI's actions so egregious that they asked for an emergency session in Parliament with questions about all of this. And they demanded, and I quote, "A full investigation by the Intelligence and Security Committee is needed. It must investigate why the FBI clearly avoided extraditing Mr. al-Bayoumi and exactly what was the involvement of the Saudi government, in particular their Ministry of Islamic Affairs and Secret Service. Where are our public officials commanding similar accountability? for the lack of transparency which has long protected the Saudis for their complicity in the atrocious murder of our loved ones. We, the victims' families and survivors, want answers, and the American people deserve to know all the details about the handling of this evidence and who made the decisions to deceive not one, but two nations. The only reason we are seeing any of this now is because of our lawsuit. Now, with broader discovery, what other deep, dark secrets will we uncover? I hope for all our sakes that this will progress without the FBI acting as hoarding gatekeepers of the truth, and that the roadblocks that they have put in place over the years will be removed. Too many victims, family members, and survivors have gone to their graves without justice. I hope the original pioneers for our quest for justice, who are no longer with us, like Bill Doyle, Tom Burnett Sr., Jack Quinn, Stephen Kozan, and Ron Motley, just to name a few. I hope they're looking down, smiling, and proud of what we have accomplished. While parents are growing old and weary, there were over 3,000 children who lost a parent on 9/11. And like Brett here, and Angela Mistrulli, who could not be with us today, and many others that have grown into adults and have joined this wretched fight with great determination and fortitude and hope. Your parents would be so proud of you. I know I am. Never forget is not just a slogan to be uttered once a year and forgotten the remaining 364 days. It is a pledge to do everything in our power to attain justice for those who were murdered and who suffered grievous injuries, and to ensure our country is never again as vulnerable as it was on September 11th, 2001. We cannot do that if the FBI and other government agencies continue to provide cover for the kingdom and other terrorist sponsors and help them to evade accountability. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We are open for questions.
You know, one thing Terry said that I just wanted to reiterate, because I feel it's so important, is that how our government knew so early on. And for 24 years, we heard the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Terry can attest to this, when we're in the halls of Washington, D.C., Terry's fighting to get JASTA passed. Their talking points are, well, the 9/11 Commission, the 9/11 Commission, the 9/11 Commission. That's all we heard. That was their only defense.
It's the only defense they use in the courtroom.
It's the only defense they had. So it's so important to let history be known that the 9/11 Commission at this point is null and void. How can you have an accurate 9/11 Commission when the most salacious and the most damning materials were kept from you? So I think that point is what is so powerful,
Right.
and I just wanted to restate that.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll start the comments.
Oh, are we, you have to go?
Well, it's supposed to start.
In here?
No, it's next door.
Okay,
We have like
okay.
100 people online.
Okay.
Okay. So are there any questions from the media?
I think we said it all.
I know, we pretty much did. We don't have room for a lot of.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Did you want to ask something?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, no, if you have a question, we're happy to answer.
What is the next steps now? Then you guys can go to trial. What's the next step?
You want to take that?
Yeah, well, discovery will be ordered. Well, actually, I imagine that the judge will set a calendar. The lawyers will go back into the court and speak about the discovery. They will put in, every single thing that they want. The Saudis will argue every single thing that we want, and then the judge will make the determination. But it'll be up to the court to set the calendar, and then it'll have to be abided by. But it'll take a long time. It takes months and months and months every time the court hands something to the lawyers to do, and then the other side counters it, and then sometimes you get to counter that one more time. I mean, that can take, if that's 3 or 4 months, that's 1 year just to get one thing done. So it'll be a while, but it'll get there. make sure the broom.
Yeah, it gets back to where it was.
All right, you were listening there to a news conference that was underway with the families of the victims there of 9/11. Now, essentially, they are calling for transparency within the government there, including the FBI, as they do prepare to mark 24 years since that terror attack. I do want to remind you here that we will have continuing coverage tomorrow as we mark that anniversary of 9/11. Several events are planned, and our coverage will begin live at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to join us here on Live Now from Fox for live coverage of all of those events. If you are just joining us here on Live Now from Fox, we are approaching the top of the hour here. It's 8:58 on the East Coast and 5:58 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here for the next several hours to bring you all of your top stories and live events from across the country and across the world. Right now, I do want to take you out to a big story that we have been following here all throughout the morning on Live Now, and take a look at this video coming in out of Poland. Now, as far as we know right now from investigators here, Poland is saying that multiple Russian drones entered its territory over the course of several hours and were shot down with help from NATO allies. Polish leaders describing this as, quote, an act of aggression carried out during a wave of Russian strikes on Ukraine. Now, the Kremlin refused to comment, but its close ally Belarus said it tracked some drones that, quote, lost their course because they were jammed. However, several European leaders said they believe that the incursion was an intentional escalation by Russia of its war in Ukraine. Poland said some of the drones came from Belarus, where their troops, alongside those Russian troops, have started gathering for war games that start on Friday. Polish airspace has been violated many times since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in 2022, but there's been nothing on this scale in Poland or in any of the Western nations. A NATO spokesman said it was the first time the alliance has confronted a potential threat in its airspace. NATO met to discuss the incident, which came 3 days after Russia's largest aerial attack on Ukraine since the war began. A lot to discuss here, so I do want to bring in David Tafuri, a former State Department official and former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here as we work to break all of this down.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And first off, I just want to ask you the overall question here of how significant is all of this? Again, a lot of developing details right now, but how significant is this?
This is very significant because, as you mentioned, this has not happened before, even though this conflict has been going on for more than 3.5 years between Russia and Ukraine. And obviously, there are a lot of countries that border on Ukraine where the conflict is happening, like Poland. There hasn't been an incursion into their airspace by Russian forces. And in this case, the drones that went into Polish airspace apparently did so for an 8-hour period or 7-hour period, according to the president of Poland. So this wasn't just, a limited one-time sort of anomaly. And my guess is that what Russia was trying to do here is to avoid the jamming and the other aerial defense that Ukraine has by going around Ukraine through Poland and then trying to enter back into Ukraine. But it is an offense to the sovereignty of Poland and to the territorial integrity of Poland. Now, notably, what Poland did is they activated Article 4 of NATO. We know a lot about Article 5. Article 5 is the Common Defense Security Guarantee. Article 4 allows a country that feels like it's been violated to call for consultations at NATO, and then NATO can have a dialogue about what to do about it. But it is also possible, especially if this happened again, that Poland could activate Article 5.
And I do want to take a look here at this post that's actually coming in from the leader of Poland right here. We have Donald Tusk, who says, "My thanks and congratulations to the Polish Operational Command and our NATO pilots for shooting down Russian drones over Poland. Actions speak louder than words." So we are getting a lot of these statements here that are coming in. Now, as far as what we should watch for in the coming days, what should we be watching for as all of this does continue to develop?
Couple of things. First of all, I spoke with someone who is in the Ukrainian armed forces last night and who just came back from the front lines. And he warned that he expects there are going to be further incursions by Russia into other European NATO countries, that this is part of the game plan for Russia. So it was interesting that it happened so quickly after he told me that. And we're going to have to watch and see what NATO does about that. A strong response from NATO might deter Russia from doing this again. If there's no response at all, you imagine Russia might think that it's able to get away with this. And often that's what Putin is trying to do. He's testing boundaries. This is a boundary he's now crossed, and he wants to see if there are consequences or not, which is why it would be wise for NATO to make sure there are consequences. I would also note that Poland has a very strong air defense. I've been there many times on my way into Ukraine. They have a lot of Patriot missiles, so they have the capability to defend themselves against these types of incursions into their airspace. But if they did, there could be an escalation between Poland and Russia.
And again, you're taking a look at some of the video that came into our newsroom a short time ago here via the Associated Press, where you can see kind of the situation here as you have crews that are on the scene. They're obviously working. This, I mean, just happened hours ago here. Any surprise that the Kremlin right now is not commenting? I imagine your answer is going to be no, but just wanted to get your perspective there.
You're right. No surprise at all. Putin and the Kremlin do not admit to things like this. They're not going to publicly accept that they did this. They will probably be mounting a disinformation and misinformation campaign to counter this and maybe blame it on the Ukrainians, as they often do.
And I actually do want to take you out, speaking of the Ukrainians, to this post. It's a little lengthy, but it did come in from Volodymyr Zelensky a short time ago as he said another report from the commander of our Air Force. "We are clarifying all available data and analyzing the details of this Russian strike already during the night. Ukrainian forces were informing the Polish side through the relevant channels about the movement of Russian drones at around, looks like 0:50 Kyiv time. The first crossing of the state border between Ukraine and Poland by a Russian drone was recorded. At least 2 Russian drones that entered Polish territory during the night used Belarus airspace. In total, at least several dozen Russian drones were moving along the border of Ukraine and Belarus and across western regions of Ukraine, approaching targets on Ukrainian territory and apparently on Polish territory. The number of Russian drones that traversed into Poland and penetrated deeply into its territory may be greater than the previously announced figure. According to updated data, around 24 of Russian drones may have entered Polish airspace during the night. That is, as you know, and as you mentioned, a lot of drones entering the Polish airspace. What should we expect to hear from President Trump on this? Because he just had that meeting with Putin just a few weeks ago, said that things seemed to be okay, and then they kind of fell apart, so to speak, in the days that followed. So what should we expect to hear from Trump?
It's always hard to predict what President Trump might do and say. You would think, based on his most recent comments, which have been critical of Putin and have expressed doubt about whether Putin really wants a ceasefire, that he would condemn Russia for having done this, and he would raise the fact that this is inconsistent with what Putin has told him, including in that meeting they had in Anchorage, and that he would be even more likely now to institute new sanctions and what he calls secondary tariffs to punish Russia as a result. But again, it's often hard to know exactly what President Trump might do in response to something like this, and so we have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll definitely wait and see there. We appreciate you talking to us about all of this, but I do want to move on very briefly here to another story that we have been tracking on Live Now from Fox over the last 24 hours or so, and this is all related to President Trump's comments saying that he was, quote, very unhappy about every aspect of Israel's strike on Hamas terrorists there in Doha, Qatar, and this is some of the video that came in from the Associated Press and Fox News. We did hear while President Trump was at a restaurant in Washington last night, he did speak with reporters about all of this and essentially said that it did catch him by surprise. Take a listen.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it. I don't have to do that. I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Did he notify you in advance, Mr. President? Did Israel tell you in advance?
No.
So you were caught by surprise, sir?
I'm never surprised by anything, especially when it comes to the Middle East.
How did you learn about this?
I'll be giving a full statement tomorrow, but I would tell you this. I was very unhappy about it, very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
And officials in Qatar putting out several statements. They now say the statements being circulated about Qatar being informed of the attack in advance are baseless. The call from a U.S. official came during the sound of explosions caused by the Israeli attack in Doha. So I did want to get your take here as to what impact all of this is likely to have maybe on the peace talks there that were taking place between Israel and Hamas. They didn't appear to be going anywhere. They essentially were falling apart at this point. What impact could all of this have?
Well, I think this is going to be devastating for the peace talks. I can't imagine that peace talks could be put back on track anytime soon as a result of this. I mean, just imagine even sort of the logistics of it are going to be very difficult because most of the peace talks were happening in Doha. They likely cannot be hosted there any longer. The representatives of Hamas would not feel safe there and certainly wouldn't feel safe going to meetings where Israel would know where they were. And so my guess is they're going to go into hiding. They're going to move to another country. It may be a less friendly country than Qatar. It may become more difficult for the other side, the United States, and for representatives of Israel to meet with them. And so just the logistics of it are going to be very difficult. But I also think this is, a signal to the world that Israel doesn't want a ceasefire right now, that they wanted to scuttle the ceasefire talks, that they have continue to have objectives inside Gaza, military objectives that they want to pursue, and that their goal is to completely annihilate all of Hamas. They've already decimated the military wing of Hamas, but I don't think that's enough for Israel. And so we have to see what President Trump is going to do. He very clearly stated he's unhappy with this. It seems clear based on what he said that he didn't give Israel permission or didn't agree with Israel doing this, that he didn't consent to it. And so we also have to wonder, what does this do to U.S.-Israeli relations? Is Trump going to hold this against Israel? Is Trump going to take measures against Israel, like putting restrictions on the use of U.S. weapons or halting some of the U.S. weapons to Israel? All of that remains to be seen.
Yeah, we'll definitely see how it plays out because, as you heard there, President Trump said he will have much more to say about it at some point today. We'll, of course, bring our viewers that as we get it. David Tafiri, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. A lot to discuss here. Anything we missed? Anything you want to make sure to add here before I let you go?
No, I think that covers it really well. Great job.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
All right, so it is now 9:10 on the East Coast and 6:10 on the West Coast. As we mentioned, when we were talking about the situation with Poland and Russia invading their airspace, we did actually get some comments from the NATO chief there, Mark Rutte, a bit earlier on today, fairly brief, but I do want to play his statement for you right now on Live Now from Fox.
Last night, numerous drones from Russia violated Polish airspace. Our air defenses were activated and successfully ensured the defense of NATO territory, as they are designed to do. Several allies were involved alongside Poland. This included Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, Italian AVECs, NATO, multi-role tanker transport and German Patriots. I commend the pilots and all who contributed to this quick and skillful response. The North Atlantic Council met this morning and discussed the situation in light of Poland's request for consultations under Article 4 of the Washington Treaty. Allies expressed solidarity with Poland and denounced Russia's reckless behavior. A full assessment of the incident is ongoing. What is clear is that the violation last night is not an isolated incident. The Supreme Allied Commander will continue to actively manage our deterrence and defense posture along the entire eastern flank. Allies are resolved to defend every inch of Allied territory. We will closely monitor the situation along our eastern flank, our air defenses continually at the ready. This only reinforces the importance of NATO and the path to which allies agreed at our summit in The Hague earlier this year. We need to invest more in our defense, ramp up defense production, so we have what we need to deter and defend. And we need to continue to support Ukraine, whose security is interlinked with our own. And let me conclude by saying that Russia is waging a dangerous war of aggression against Ukraine that continually targets civilians and civilian infrastructure. Allies are determined to step up their support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's escalating campaign. With that, I'm willing to take one or two questions.
Secretary General, thank you very much. Andrew Gray from Reuters. Do you have any initial assessment of the intent behind this incident? Was it a deliberate attack, a deliberate incursion, or a mistake? And do you have any particular message for Russia, for President Putin, about this incident?
Yes, as I said, a full assessment is ongoing. But of course, whether it was intentionally or not, it is absolutely reckless. It is absolutely dangerous. But as I said, the full assessment is ongoing. And to Putin, I mean, my message is clear. Stop the war in Ukraine. Stop the escalating war, which he is now basically mounting on innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure. Stop violating Allied airspace. And know that we stand ready. That we are vigilant and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
Well, one more if I may. Does this tell you anything about the state of NATO's air defences, particularly when it comes to drones, a relatively new threat? Does NATO need to do more to better protect against drones?
I think what we have seen last night was a very successful reaction by NATO. And allies, including, of course, Poland itself, but also the Dutch and the Italians and the Germans, everybody involved. And I'm really impressed. So, of course, we always have to make sure that we are one step ahead. But I think last night showed that we are able to defend every inch of NATO territory, including, of course, its airspace. Thank you so much.
All right, NATO Secretary General there, Mark Rutte, making a brief statement and taking just a couple questions from members of the media, all related to Russia invading Poland's airspace and essentially explaining what happens next. Poland saying that its NATO allies did help to shoot down those drones. It is now 9:15 on the East Coast and 6:15 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here for the next several hours to bring you all of your top stories and live events from across the country and across the world. We're going to head to a quick 2-minute commercial break, but a lot more coverage to get to in just a few. Stay with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Chevy makes America's most dependable trucks, like the rugged Colorado, the highly capable Silverado 1500, the powerful Silverado HD, and the uncompromising Silverado EV. With the off-road ready Trail Boss family, dependability comes standard. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
You're looking pretty good, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, okay.
The front desk said you recently enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan.
Oh, okay.
Well, Medicare Parts A and B do not cover your routine dental coverage. Yes, you have a Medicare Part C plan, commonly called Medicare Advantage. Medicare Part C plans cover everything in Part A and Part B, plus benefits like dental, vision, or hearing.
Wow, that's great that my plan includes dental coverage that helps pay for these costs.
If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call now because there may be plans available with additional benefits that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B, like routine dental coverage. In fact, nearly half of Medicare beneficiaries do not have any dental coverage. Here's the good news. 2025 Medicare Advantage plans are now available. You can call now and talk to a licensed insurance agent to learn more about Medicare Advantage plans from Humana, United Healthcare, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Aetna, Cigna Healthcare, WellCare, or Kaiser Permanente. We will check to see if there is a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. Call now for your free, no-obligation 2025 Medicare benefits review.
Just call 800-591-8044. 800-591-8044. 800-591-8044.
Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox. It is Wednesday, September 10th. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'll be with you for the next several hours with all of your top stories, breaking news, and live events from across the country and across the world. Right now, I do want to take you out live to this image that we do have coming in out of Poland. As we know, there's an investigation underway here after those Russian drones invaded Polish airspace. As you heard from an expert here just about 10 minutes ago, this is a major deal because we have not seen anything of this magnitude here during that war with Ukraine that Russia launched back in February of 2022. We're going to keep an eye on this developing situation and make sure to keep you updated here on Live Now. Right now, British Defense Minister John Healey and other defense ministers have met to discuss all of this here, as well as essentially the war between Ukraine and Russia. They are speaking right now, so I want to dip in just to see if this portion is in English.
The drone attack that took place last night. Over the meeting, we confirmed the importance Poland attaches to the E5 format as a platform for discussing issues of great importance for the European security, transatlantic relations. The war or the Russia's aggression of Ukraine and support or assistance for Ukraine. That was definitely confirmed. This is something that we want to, as a Poland, develop as I just said, as a platform for not only discussing things, but also looking for specific initiatives in the areas I just mentioned. When it comes to what happened over Poland last night, as you just heard, solidarity was expressed, conviction that we need more as an alliance, as a NATO. We need more coherence, more unity, that we should look also in practical terms how to make not only Poland but all the flank countries better able to cope with the threats we had to cope with last night. And as it was also already mentioned, the response was collective in a manner, not only Polish assets, Polish aircraft, but also those of some other allies were involved in it, activated or used. And it is the best example of solidarity, of unity. And we, as a Poland, we want to discuss, we would like to discuss this issue further within the NATO framework to be sure that we as a NATO, that we are able to, that we will be able to in the future to respond to such threats in the best possible way. Thank you very much.
Marcin, thank you. Just a reminder, Marcin and Alice will not be answering questions, but the ministers will. Carl Dinnan.
Thank you very much. Carl Dinnan from ITV News. I'd like to ask the ministers, don't last night's events prove that ever since Alaska, everything that President Putin has done has shown that he's not negotiating in good faith, and that really the West shouldn't be talking to him in the absence of a ceasefire?
So while President Putin is talking to President Trump in Alaska, he's intensifying and escalating attacks on Ukraine. We have to help support Ukraine to resist that Russian invasion. We have to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position to go into any talks, and we have to work together to put pressure on Putin to do what he says. And what he says is he wants to talk. What he says is he wants peace. And whatever the intent behind yesterday's attacks on Poland, they were reckless, they were dangerous, they were an attack on NATO airspace and on NATO sovereignty, and we will stand together and we will support Poland through NATO to resist those in the future.
Secretary of State, thank you very much. Can I ask an Italian journalist to ask a question? Luigi Ippolito.
Sì, Luigi Ippolito for the Corriere della Sera. Question for the Italian Minister. Signor Ministro, i jet italiani si sono levati in volo per partecipare all'operazione di contrasto ai droni russi, anche se in una funzione, diciamo, di supporto.
All right, as you could hear there, they have moved on to other languages. Again, this is kind of switching between English and those other languages as we're talking about defense ministers and other officials from several countries there to discuss Poland's airspace being invaded by those Russian drones just hours ago. Right now, I do want to take you out to some of the comments that were made at the start that were also in English here as we heard from British and other officials.
As they are policy officials and not ministers. But without further ado, let me ask Secretary of State for Defence John Healey to begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So today in London here, we held our 5th E5 Defence Ministers meeting at what has become a significant moment in European security. We face a new era of threat. War in Europe, rising Russian aggression, and last night Putin hit a new level of hostility against Europe. We saw across NATO's eastern border a serious violation of Polish airspace, deep enough for Warsaw Airport to be closed, and NATO jets shooting down Russian drones in what is the first defensive action of its kind since Putin launched his full-scale attack on Ukraine. And just at the same period as Russia's attacks on Ukraine intensify. And as the Prime Minister Starmer said this morning, these moves, he said, only serve to remind us of President Putin's blatant disregard for peace. So together, we, the E5, totally condemn these attacks. Russians' actions are reckless, they're dangerous, they're unprecedented. We see what Putin is doing. Yet again, he is testing us. Yet again, we will stand firm. And Defence Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz rightly returned home to Poland in the very early